Alright guys, welcome back to another video and welcome to the first of many Madden 19 feature focus slash breakdown slash impression videos that I'll be putting out over the next week or two. Obviously this weekend has been huge in terms of Madden 19 information, and we got a lot of stuff on not only gameplay but also a decent amount of stuff on franchise as well, which I'm going to be covering all week. But first off, I'm going to start by going through some of the gameplay stuff, the gameplay deep dive that was released by EA, as well as some other bits of information from other sources as well, and just giving my general thoughts, impressions, concerns, and that kind of thing. Once the franchise deep dive drops, I'll be doing the same thing for that as well, but with those I'll likely be making individual videos and going a little more in depth on each of those features that are within franchise, whereas with this I'm just going to kind of lump it all together and quickly go through everything in one video. So right out of the gate, the biggest addition this year is obviously going to be real player motion, which is something that's already been utilized in both FIFA and UFC 3, which both look really nice in terms of movement and just in motion in general. Obviously replicating football is its own kind of beast, but player movement has been something that has plagued Madden ever since that transition to the 360 and PS3. And while it's gotten better over the years, it's always been something that left a lot to be desired and really in need of an overhaul, and that seems to be what we're getting this year. And like I mentioned before, ever since that 360 PS3 transition though, the movement has always had a very unnatural and just overall clunky feel to it. Acceleration and deceleration has always felt, for the most part, ignored, as well as speed to a certain extent, which has lent itself to this very swervy and arcadey movement. So the importance that seems to be placed on that in general, and then with things like the one cut and strafe burst mechanics, those kind of things are a potentially huge thing in my opinion. I go back to the Xbox PS2 Maddens where player movement was far from perfect, but the running animations were great in my opinion. The jukes and spins felt good. Just the entirety of that movement system felt fluid. So despite all the skating that occurred and the overall lack of animations in its library, I've always wanted Madden to kind of get back to that point of having that much fluidity and responsiveness and just the overall natural feel that those older Maddens had. Obviously, like I said before, something like this has potential to be a real game changer, and while I'm extremely hesitant to believe that right out of the gate, just strictly because of what we've seen out of things like the Infinity engine and the Ignite engine, I'm hoping that it can at least deliver that solid player movement base that we haven't really seen in Madden for a long time. I've seen some of the leaked footage already that's come out, and I don't really ever put too much stock into any of that at all, but just from those short videos, there's times where it does look really good, but there's also times where it looks pretty weird. But like with anything like this, it's gonna have its growing pains, and like I said before, as long as it can provide a more solid base moving forward than what we've had in past years, then I'm really excited to see what it can offer and where it's headed. Looking at hit the hole and push the pile, these are also things that should help out not only the feel of the game but the look of it as well. Another issue Madden has long had is the interaction when it comes to a running back or just a ball carrier in general running behind the blockers. So seeing and being able to do things like contextually get through a small hole in the line or put a hand on a lineman's back and push forward rather than kind of ragdolling to the ground or tripping over a lineman might seem like smaller things, and in reality they are, but those things also go a long way in making sure that things are playing out organically and realistically. Moving on to the catching of improvements, these sound interesting, but I'm not really sure what to expect here. As a simulation guy, hearing more freedom for the user is always one of those things that kind of scares me a little bit, simply because of the issues that commonly pop up when it comes to balance with those type of things. If you remember when they first implemented the wide receiver DB interactions, you'd often have bottom of the barrel receivers mossing DBs left and right, and this seems more like it's something that's geared towards the head-to-head crowd, at least mechanic wise, but the improved interactions and tuning should also be something that will benefit somebody like me. Outside of the real player motion, this was honestly what I was most excited about when I was reading through this deep dive, and that is the tackling and the new momentum system. This is another one of those issues I've long had with Madden as well, that it's very similar to the issue I've had with regard to respecting acceleration and deceleration, but in this case it more has to do with weight and momentum. There's been way too many times in the past where you can be running full speed with a big RB or a tight end towards the goal line or first down marker, just in general, general, and you'll have a small corner that's standing flat-footed, and he'll end up standing you up and actually driving you backwards. And to the other side of that, there'd often be scenarios where you'd see a guy like Darren Sproles carrying linemen for a couple of yards, or trucking linemen in certain cases. So seeing momentum and weight especially playing a role is something that I'll definitely be keeping an eye on once we get more video out in the wild, because as with a lot of this stuff, it's not exactly stuff that we haven't heard before or that they haven't said before, and we're still 2 months out from release, and if last year was any indication, things can drastically change in that time period between now and release. Also with this, I'm really hoping that as a result of this emphasis on momentum and all of that and real player motion, that tackle battles have been eliminated. I've always hated the mechanic itself, and the animations that play out as a result of that mechanic are arguably some of the worst in Madden, so safe to say there'd be no love lost there if it didn't make it into Madden 19. Moving on to signatures here, the quarterback stuff sounds great and goes a long way in immersion. I'm a big immersion guy, and it's a super small thing, but like with Madden 18 or any past Madden, when you get that thing like hearing Alex Smith's specific cadence as a Chiefs fan rather than a generic cadence, that's something that's super cool to me. I love little things like that, and those go a long way with me. So being able to see things like that unique to certain players will be really cool. One thing I hope they do, if not immediately, but in the future with this, is add a catalog of generic type things for future players to give them their own unique quirks, so that once you get further into franchise and generic players start to take over, you still have that element of personalization among players, albeit in a somewhat generic and different fashion there. The celebration stuff here seems cool as well. I tweeted out a GIF Saturday of the Chiefs potato sack race celebration from this past year. So seeing that kind of stuff is always cool. And then going back to the QB thing, it's always great when you can get that true to life personalization for certain players in there as well. Going all the way back to the Madden 06, Madden 05 days, I remember when I'd score a touchdown with Priest Holmes and he'd contextually do his signature TD celebration, and then when Dante Hall would score a touchdown, he'd throw up the X just like he did in real life. And adding that kind of personality to the game with those kind of things are small things, but I absolutely love them, and they go a long way with me. And then lastly here, I love how they throw this kind of stuff in at the end. It's not sexy stuff at all like some of the other things, but this is the stuff that I love reading about most. New versions of cover 4 and quarters and palms, improvements to both cover 3 and cover 2, as well as protect the sticks. Obviously with everything, again, it's all wait and see with these kind of things, but hearing about improvements in this area is always welcomed and good to see. So that covers everything in the blog, but going back to the real player motion and just Madden in general, I think the EA Play trailer did a pretty terrible job of showing off the game and showing off that player motion, and I wasn't really a fan of it. Obviously, that's not something designed to grab my attention, but I've always disliked that cinematic style when it comes to a reveal trailer especially, and overall it didn't look good in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure it was CGI too. That being said, if you guys haven't seen the video from Zan going over the ball carrier mechanics, I encourage you to check that out, because the player movement in that video looks a lot better, and the game in general just looks a lot better in that video than what was shown in that trailer. Moving on to another video from Litezoutttt, which highlighted the top 10 legacy fixes or gameplay improvements. There's a couple things in there that never really affected me or were never really going to be issues that I had, like the air truck thing, and then the user fake out, which is actually something I wanted to hit on. I know initially last year they had it to where the AI could trigger those fake outs on the user controlled players, and let me tell you, I absolutely hated that. But the reason why I hated it was that it didn't seem like there was any rhyme or reason to it. I'd be controlling guys like Derek Johnson and Eric Berry and basically having the control taken out of my hands to have their ankles broken by guys with 75 spin or quarterbacks at times, and that's what made it so frustrating. And I'm pretty sure that it was something that was completely patched out late in the Madden 18 cycle. But anyways, he mentions in the video that if there's a 20 to 25 point difference in the defender's pursuit ratings and the ball carrier's move rating, then the fake outs will occur. But also if you're strafing, then fake outs won't occur. And I'm not sure how that plays into simulation versus competitive, or if that's just a head-to-head thing, but that's actually something I wouldn't mind seeing on the simulation setting, where those fake outs were capable of happening against the AI, but all depending on that threshold. And when it comes to the threshold, I think 20 to 25 is a bit too high or too wide of a range, and I think I'd rather see that be more in that 10 to 15 range, meaning that if it's in that range, a fake out is more likely to occur but never guaranteed. And the reason behind that is simply because it's something that can help with player differentiation and be something that doesn't allow me as a user to take a crappy player and make them better simply by controlling them. The coaching adjustment changes were hit and miss for me. I like that the offense will now get free plays from the aggressive pass rush rather than it just always resulting in an offsides. But I think the change to make it worse against the run simply by having blocks being held longer is kind of dumb, and it seems more like a band-aid to me. It should be worse against the run, but for other reasons like ends getting too far up the field and losing gap discipline rather than just blocks being artificially held longer because of it. Legacy fix number 5 from his video though was absolutely huge for me, and I loved hearing it, and that was improvements to AI play calling. This is something that, if you know me from OS, I've harped on and done a lot of research into, and it's something I've wanted to make a video on since I started, but haven't really, just because it's something that has more to do with gameplay. But giving the AI access to more of its playbook was something that was a huge issue dating pretty much all the way back to probably Madden 13. And just to keep it short, basically the issue was that the CPU would only have access to 20 plays from its entire playbook at any given time during the game, and was really only capable of utilizing around 40% of its playbook in general. Then on top of that, something like the AI calling less screens and 4 verticals especially is huge. Going back to the play calling, pretty much every team in the game was set up to where if it was 3rd and 9 or a 3rd and long situation, over half of the plays that they had available to call were going to end up being 4 verticals. Less quarterback sacks is again huge. Quarterback AI has been a huge issue for me, and hearing about improvements to that makes me very happy, and I can't wait to see how well that is working, because really any improvement there is going to be huge. Everything else was pretty much pertaining to how certain plays worked or how certain things worked, which, like I said with the end of the deep dive blog, is a lot of wait and see with those kind of things. But that's going to do it. I'll make sure to link everything that I talked about in the description: the gameplay deep dive, Zan's ball carrier video, and then Litezoutt's top 10 improvements video as well. So be sure to check those out if you haven't seen them already. As with everything at this time of the year though, it's all wait and see. So for anything I talked about that I liked or that I think is going to be a huge improvement or that could be a huge improvement, it's all based on potential, and I like the sound and potential of a lot of the things here. But let me know your guys' overall impressions of what's come out, what you liked, what you didn't like. There's going to be a lot of videos coming from me, especially pertaining to franchise, so be on the lookout for those. I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown and the impressions as well, and as always, thanks for watching.